Okay, so I think most people probably know me as Barnabas, obviously one of the Bell family, the very big, loud family that's used at the back of church. Just turned 30 about a month ago. I've been married to Isabel for almost 6 years now, and I've been raised in a thoroughly Christian household. All of my family are committed believers, have followed Jesus. We've had, Bible readings and times of prayer with family since childhood. So that was always the culture that we were raised in, effectively. Coming to this church now for probably over 10 years as well, but we've pretty much always stayed in Lincoln within these sort of Pentecostal charismatic churches. So that's kind of a little bit about my background in the church and about myself, yeah. I'd say growing up, faith felt more like just a framework of rules. I think that's probably true in most families who are raised in the church. Of course, as you kind of mature in your faith and you develop a relationship with Jesus, it realises that actually it's about relationship. But as a kid, while I loved and respected my parents, I was not remotely invested in church or faith or reading my Bible. In fact, I had a Bible in the year plan, and I think my dad had to bribe me and some of my brothers about £10 to get us to finish it before the end of the year, which is doesn't reflect well on us, but he was just trying to get us to spend time reading the Word, and he did a great job because we did commit to it. We always saw the value of what it looked like to be in a Christian family compared to an unbelieving family, because we saw the fruits of it. We had incredible, loving, hardworking parents. We had other families who were believers around us, and we saw the same sort of beautiful modeled behaviours in other families. But for the most part, it was very much a set of rules that we followed to be good and have a good life. It was more just a how to live guide. And that was probably pretty consistent until I was just a fairly young man, to be honest, until at the very least my late teens, when things started to shift, as it usually does. And that really kind of changed, I think, for the first time when I went to Soul Survivor with the youth group from this church. So we're talking about 2015, 16 now. That's the first time it went from just going to church, praying, raising hands, doing all the normal stuff, saying the words you need to say, the prayers, to seeing not only God's power through signs and wonders, but real transformation in people's lives. And so, yeah, that really was the kind of first time from childhood religion into relationship in my youth. I'd say the decisive point, which I actually had a screenshot on my old phone actually of the day, because I got prayer from my dad and Felix, and I think Felix said something to the effect of, "You'll remember this day," and it was the 21st or 22nd of April last year. So ironically, I've semi-forgotten, but 21st or 22nd of April 2024. Prior to that point, it had been a very, very tough 4 or so years, where my wife and I had been trying to start a family, had been medically diagnosed with kind of infertility, told that the chances of it happening naturally are very, very low. And as you probably expect, amongst a very big family where lots of people are having children, in that time since that had been diagnosed, we knew people who were dated, married, and had more than one child. And it was just, I think my wife and I were just very deeply depressed. But in the run-up to that time in April, I was in a worse place than Isabel for sure, but she had kind of patiently encouraged me to come along to church anyway and really dragged me along. I didn't want to. I was already just depressed and unhappy with my life. I didn't really have a job that I particularly was deeply passionate about at the time. I had struggled with things like pornography, which is true for most young guys, and you couldn't break out of that shame and the guilt that comes with that anyway, so let alone go to church and expect any real breakthrough. But on that day, that Sunday, I went along not really expecting anything and just not wanting to be there. But my dad, I think it was, prompted us and said, let's go and let's get prayer. And so, I walked to the front, and both of them prayed for me, and I didn't actually initially feel anything. I didn't fall backwards or start speaking in tongues, no fire above my head or anything like that. Would have been cool. But I said thanks, and then I got a coffee and I walked out of the church. And I remember walking out of the church and just thinking, something is definitively, distinctly different, and I could not for the life of me articulate it. And I'd had the sort of spiritual highs and lows at Soul Survivor, the sort of, you go to these events and then you go back and you kind of cool off. But it just felt different, and I thought, I don't understand. And there was the very distinct sense of joy, which is a sort I'd never really felt, to be completely honest. It would never materialise in my life. And again, not happiness, but actual joy, like the sort of overflowing sensation that only you get from the Holy Spirit. And that was the time I'd say I was kind of really born again as a believer. That was where my relationship with Jesus properly started. That's where I encountered Jesus, and that's where my life went from just attending church as a kind of cultural Christian to deciding I want to live for Jesus and pursue ministry, and all that really mattered was preaching the gospel with all the zeal in the world. That's really the spark, the flashpoint in my life, I guess. I think the main piece of advice I could pass on to, I would suppose, younger believers, but it doesn't have to be young believers, anyone who's just trying to grow in their faith, was probably fellowship and community were the two core parts that I never really appreciated and understood. It's very easy in the modern world to be disconnected and isolated away from it. And this has become only more true in the last year, that growing up people talked about fellowship and community. Fellowship was sort of the buzzword. But I never really understood it until I realised that when you're always surrounded by people who actually love you, who are actual believers, who actually have your best interests at heart, they will make sure at your low points, they will help you up. They will counsel you, they will draw you closer to God, they will pray with you, they will teach you and give you guidance and counsel, they will encourage you. And without even realising it, that was always there because I had my entire family around. I had an amazing wife, and people at the church who I don't doubt were praying for me. And then since then I've really gathered its appreciation and understood just how important it actually was. And so now we're stuck in with a family group. We're just incredibly valued and love all of them. And even at the lowest point since then, because since then we've had plenty of real intense challenges, we've never really fallen back to that point. It has always been, we've always been supported by Bill and Edna and Jen and Anthony, Matthew, Pauline, all the people in our house group. They're absolutely wonderful. So I suppose, in closing, I would just encourage believers outside of fellowship and community to keep pressing on. Paul talks about running the race for Christ. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And while it's easy to get disillusioned in the world and isolate yourself away from those, the only solution to any problem you will ever have in your life will be Jesus. He's the only one that can fix your problems, so don't run from him, but go to him.